Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for really even though it's our second official Authentic Conversations podcast, it's kind of like our first big table talk. I am Kenny Albert. I'm the youth pastor at New Hope Worship Center. I have the honor and the privilege to serve along these two lovely people, Pastor Carrie and Pastor Dale. Pastor Dale is the face of the podcast, so you'll be seeing him a lot. And so today we're going to just spend some time to kind of get to know each other. I know you guys quite well, but I think it's going to be really helpful for everybody who maybe they just stumbled upon this some way, and just to kind of get to know you guys. So we want to have like a very relaxed, chill time, just talking about your lives a little bit, how you guys got to where you were, and then maybe we'll dive into a couple of topics that I think are going to be really helpful. But before we do that, Pastor, I would love for you just to kind of share, we talked about it in the first podcast, kind of the bigger general direction, and gave it a little bit more detail and vision behind why we're doing this, because why just another podcast? You know, that's kind of like the big answer that we need to kind of put out there. But what I would love for you to do, just this kind of maybe highlight a couple of things and just talk about why are we doing this?
Yeah. Well, and it's true because there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of information that's out there. But one of the things that I have come to realize is that we all, particularly right now in our culture, in our world, really, and certainly in our community, we need relationships. Yeah. We need conversations. We need that care. We need just that extra bit of connection that we can get. And so what I'm wanting to do is try to go below the surface. You know, there are things that we talk about, and they're all very important, spiritual principles and things that God's speaking to us. But to go below the surface and be able to really kind of walk that out a little bit, to put that into practice, to get our faith on the ground a little bit, and to really bring hope and encouragement to people. And so I hope that through these conversations that we'll be able to do that and to hear from different voices, different perspectives and different thoughts and ideas, and wrestle through some things. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't even know all of where it's going to land, but I think it's going to be very important for us to walk through it together.
Yeah, I think that's so good. So now let's dive in a little bit and talk about you guys. So I've been able to serve with you guys for about 7 years now. And one of the things I absolutely love about you guys are just so much fun. I wish you guys could have saw like some of the things that they were doing, especially Pastor Carrie, before as we were getting ready, just some of the quirkiness of her, because she doesn't come off like she looks quirky, but she's super quirky, and I absolutely love it. But what I also love is how different your backgrounds are. And how God kind of brought you guys together, and the dynamic. I think just the way that God brings couples together sometimes is just so powerful, and the way that he uses our stories so that they balance off each other and that they just work together. So sometimes you would look at it like, I don't know if they really would fit together, but when they're together and God is in the middle of them, there's just amazing things. So I would love for you guys just to take a couple moments, share about your background a little bit. I don't care, maybe Pastor Carrie, if you want to go first. Just kind of talk about like, where did you grow up? Where did you come from? How did you get to meet Pastor Dale? Like, how did you guys meet? Maybe talk about that a little bit, and then we'll hear his side of the story and see if it matches up. So
Exactly. Yeah, see if it's all true. Well, first of all, and I think you know this, but I'm from Ohio, from northern Ohio. Yeah. Grew up right across the street from Lake Erie. I mean, just a lake girl growing up, and loved it. Had a great family, wonderful parents, and in my teenage years ended up then having step-parents. So I come from a home that has had, I have a step-sibling as well, and so I kind of started in that time frame of us becoming, my parents divorcing and remarrying. I was on a journey of just, who is Jesus? I wasn't raised really in a Christian home, had very loving parents, but was kind of just curious who he was because I just didn't really know. And so my journey began when I was about 15 years old. I had a cousin that had invited me to church. And
so you didn't go to church at all, like growing up? Or were you guys like Christmas and Easter people? Or
not Christmas, Easter. Okay. I had a grandmother that would take me to the Episcopal church every once in a while. So I have this Italian grandmother.
Some people call it Episcopal.
Awesome. But it's the Episcopal. And so I'd gone there a few times, I could say before my earlier years, before I was 8 years old. After that, it didn't happen as often. Okay. So that's the only memory I have of church.
Wow.
So that's kind of, I just really didn't know a lot.
Now, did your family not, I've never really asked you about this, so I think it's just a cool opportunity to ask this. So was your family just, like, did they not believe in God, or was there just something against the church specifically that they thought? Like, why do you think, like, why weren't you guys going to church? Like, what do you think is the main factor that you didn't grow up in church?
You know what? I just think it wasn't a rhythm of their lives, my parents' lives growing up. And so then it didn't become a part of a rhythm of our life. I don't think they didn't believe in God. I just think he just wasn't a part of their thought and life process. Okay. And so I think they loved me as much as they knew how to love me and raise me as their child. But I don't know that was just, as a lot of people out there are that way.
Yeah.
He's, in a time of crisis, you turn to God and you pray.
Yeah.
But when things are well, he's not often a part of your thought process and so I think for most of our life, we lived a pretty good life.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't that need. I mean, we hit crisis moments for the most part, but like most people do. But I think that's just what it came down to.
Yeah.
They could,
cool.
within their own strength, function through life and felt like that's what they were supposed to do.
Yeah. I was just curious about that because I never actually asked you the question like, okay, so why didn't they take you to church? I think it's just kind of interesting to hear people's thoughts and opinions sometimes. Yeah. So, okay, so you, Nana, is that what was your grandmother's name? Or?
Actually, yeah, my granny is the one that took me to the Episcopal church, but I do have a Nana too, she's the one that's from England. So.
All right, so go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted your story. So
no, it's all good. But anyway, so I really, when I discovered Christ at 15, and it really was transformational for me. Because I think I looked for acceptance, love in a lot of areas even before then. But when I found him, it truly changed my life. And so it set me on this course that I had no idea I'd be heading on.
And how did you find Christ at 15? So how did you get into the church building? Like, was there a family member? I think it was a family member, right?
My cousin had invited me to the Foursquare Church in Vermilion, Ohio.
Okay.
So, and actually her father-in-law was the pastor. But regardless, she would have probably invited me to church. And I went, and it really was the day after I visited because I just sensed God's presence for the first time, was very attracted to their style of worship. I loved music. And so it was the next day that they literally presented me with the gospel and I accepted Jesus. So I just knew this was, but I can see how God throughout my whole life put people in my path to talk about Jesus, to talk about God's love for me, to talk about what to anticipate in the days to come. And I think it was, again, those were seeds that were planted by others. But she got to reap the harvest. And so cool. So it was a great time. And after that, that's where I started attending church, was just the Foursquare Church. And I
don't think people realize the power of an invite sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know? And you don't have to be like an adult invite an adult. You know, even like, I remember when I was a kid, I sat next to this kid named Nazi Dawood Dakri. He was this, nowadays Nazi's he's like 6'5", big black man. I just absolutely love him. So when me and Nazi sat next to each other in kindergarten, and I invited his family, I invited him to come to Wednesday night church with me when I was a kid. And so he came, and then sometime later, I don't remember the timeline, but then later on, his parents started coming, and they used to be in church, but they just kind of got disconnected. And now we're looking back, I don't know, I'm 30. I always said I'm almost 30. I'm 30. I've got to get used to that. But now I look back, and Nazi's parents are now associate pastors at my dad's church.
Awesome.
You know, and it just started with a little kid inviting another kid. Yeah. And God has a story for everybody.
Yes.
That's right.
And sometimes it just takes a little bit of courage and obedience to invite somebody, and then you pull out a Pastor Carrie, you know? Yeah. You know, it's just, I just absolutely love it. Yeah. So that's so cool. Okay, anyway, so then you come to know Jesus around 15, and then what happens next in life?
You know what's exciting is through that time, obviously attending church and going, my family was very supportive of it. They might not have attended with me, but they allowed me to go, and so my cousin would take me to church. And but in that time frame, so much happened. It was through our camps. I ended up going to youth camp, and through that time period, I sensed a call of God on my life. And honestly, with that call that I sensed, it was kind of prophetically spoken over me by people that were praying for me. I knew I was supposed to go to Bible college and first of all, I was honored that God would even consider me to do that. It wasn't even on my radar. I mean, I planned on doing other things with art or music. And so when that was spoken over me, I was just humbled and in awe and said, sure, God, whatever you want. And I'm just so excited to be able to do that. And, of course, my family thought I was a little on the crazy side. They're like, barber college? I'm like, no, Bible college. I'm not going to cut hair. I want to see lives transformed. I learned about Jesus. And so it was an interesting, conversation
Yeah.
to have with my family at the time. But, and at the end of the day, I ended up going to our denomination's Bible college, which was Mount Vernon Bible College at the time. And I did not meet Dale there. So you're wanting to get to us eventually at some
Yeah.
point. But so when the campus ended up moving into Virginia in Christiansburg, that's where I met Dale.
Okay.
So I was a junior. So now I'm older than Dale. You already knew that, but by a couple of years. And then we met there, and that's kind of where our friendship and story began on that side. So
All right, so now we'll go to you.
Okay.
Me and you kind of have a similar background. I know that. A little bit different, but similar in a lot of ways. So why don't you go ahead and share how you got to Bible college, and then we'll pick it up from there.
So, very distinct from my wife's story. I was raised in church. My parents are pastors, ministers in our denomination, but they were pastors all of my life. And I have a lot of aunts and uncles and grandparents on both sides of my family that are very involved in the church, if not in ministry. And that's not to say all of them are, but there are a lot. And so I have a lot of multi-generational, I'm very thankful for the strength and the, where I come from and the family that I have. But not perfect by any means. And so I had my own process of, and interestingly enough, at camp was, some very real moments in my life. There's a lot that happens in a child's life and in a teenager's life in environments like camp or a retreat or something like that. And that was true for me too. And so I had some very real moments with the Lord where I felt, just a sense of not only just me growing I got saved when I was very young, but then of course I grew into an understanding of what that actually meant and why that was important to me. And so the more you grow in understanding, the more that the depth of your decisions becomes rooted a little bit deeper. And but then I was called into ministry. I always sensed that was a part of my life, but then I really heard that from the Lord, or I sensed it. There wasn't an out loud voice as much as a sensing in my heart. And so I knew I needed to pursue that and go to Bible college, and so that's what I did. And so I went to Bible college and went to Life Bible College East in Christiansburg, Virginia. It happened to be the very first year that the campus had moved there from Mount Vernon, and that's associated with our denomination, the Foursquare denomination, which some are familiar with and some may not who are listening to this, but just a really wonderful family denomination that we belong to. I'm very thankful for that. So that's where Carrie and I met, and actually we worked together at the Cracker Barrel. And so we got to know each other because we were both being trained. The Cracker Barrel store had just opened. The restaurant had just opened. Yep. And so they were training, and we had a bunch of college kids. We needed jobs. Yeah. And they were looking for people to do stuff. So that's how we met each other.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's ask this question. Who liked who first? And how did you guys figure out I like you, you like me, so tell me a little bit about that story. How did it all start off, and who wants to go first?
Okay, so in real time as you're living life, we had such a wonderful friendship, and there was a couple years difference, which is not a big deal to us now, but when you're in college, I was a freshman, she was a junior. I really looked up to her and respected her in so many ways. And she seemed to be the kind of person, and truly was, that really knew who she was and where she was heading in life. I felt like I was still just beginning a journey. And so I didn't even consider the idea that we would be together as a couple, that she just was in a different league than I was.
Aww.
So that's that. Although, I was very mature as a freshman.
Yes, he was.
But it really was. So we had a very authentic and real friendship because we worked together, and there was a lot, just of life, the student life, and things that we did. But one thing I know, see, now that I look back though, I can look back and I can think of many times where I just was, it was more than infatuation. It was a very sincere, I really loved being with her. I loved talking with her. I loved the times that we would be able to just, whether it was just fun or just serious conversations or whatever. So looking back, you can see these little markers.
Yep.
At the time, I wouldn't have necessarily identified it that way. Do you want to tell the story? Or do you want me to tell the story about how we kind of just, the light bulb came on?
Well, I'll add to this before we
Okay.
talk about the light bulb moment. But one thing I've always appreciated about Dale, and when I first met him, and it's still a quality that he has to this day, is he is a genuinely loving person. And there was this safety and trust that I immediately felt when I was around him.
Yeah.
And so we really were like the best of friends. He was someone I thought, this is a true friend that I feel like I can talk about anything with and be real. I felt like he was accepting of who I was, regardless of anything. And so I just deeply admired that about him. So hanging out with Dale was such a natural thing to do. We just hung out, and it was just great. And he was up for fun and adventures, which I love to do. But we just really, there was something not only about him as a person, but maybe it was his background of faith, of just having such a long close relationship with Jesus that I admired. And I was like, there's just such depth to you as a person. And I deeply respected that. And so my heart was always open, not so much in saying, oh, is this the man I'm going to marry one day? But it's just, I trusted the heart and the soul of this person. And so it just made it so easy to just journey through regardless, whatever God led to. But so, yeah, that's what I loved and admired about you. Do you want to go ahead and lead to the...
Well, we became very close. We worked together. We did a lot of things together. And then we came to a point, this was very interesting. We had a mutual friend who came to each one of us, and there's some details around this, but bottom line, we had a mutual friend, came to each one of us, and she sat down with each of us, alone. So I remember this conversation for me, that she was sitting across from me, and she said, have you ever thought about being in a relationship with Carrie? And now a lot of people had said that. A lot of people had jokingly, so it wasn't a brand new conversation. I had heard that many, many times. And we had to kind of navigate that, with a lot of different friends and whatever. Who would just flippantly say things. But she sat down and she actually asked that question. I said, I started to deflect it. And she said, no, listen, there's something about when you guys are together, there's a peace. It just seems right. And when she said that, it was honest. I don't know how to describe it. It was like just the scales went away from my eyes. And I knew, somewhere deep inside of me, here's what happened. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to marry Carrie Buchanan. It just all of a sudden became, I just knew it in a split second. And because I think all of the ingredients for the relationship were already there.
Yeah.
But it was just that awareness that this was actually, A, possible, and B, God seemed to be breathing into this. There was something very, and for me, that's very important. I want to hear the voice of God on these. This is a huge decision, right? What I didn't know was that our friend had actually had a conversation with Carrie as well. And I don't remember which one she talked with first. But so I was completely unaware of that. Carrie, well, from your perspective, did you know that she had talked with me? Did you already know that?
She hadn't talked to you yet. She talked to me first.
Okay.
Because it was one of those passing things. Again, this isn't something that was uncommon for us to hear. How it is when you're in college. I think it happens to every young adult at some point. But again, the similar things that she said to me was, there's an anointing when the two of you are together. And she said, would you just pray about it? Don't, again, deflect. Yeah. And I said, yes. And I'd shut our apartment door because it was my roommate. When I'd shut my apartment door, the Lord really showed me. I was going to study with another friend, and the Lord just kind of really, and he needed to give me a picture of how he had ordained our friendship, and that it wasn't just for the basis of a really good friendship, but that he'd been navigating our lives if we were pursuing that future together for marriage. And because the Lord has to interrupt me because I'm very driven and focused. I hate to say that Jesus has to interrupt me, like he does sometimes. And so I was definitely, I had my goals. I was a senior in college, so I was getting ready to, this is halfway through my senior year. I'm like, I'm on a mission to graduate and go somewhere, and be in ministry full-time, hopefully somewhere. But that was a divine interruption. And I remember thinking, wow, do I get to marry my best friend? That's the first thing that came to mind.
Cool.
It really did, because I thought, he's going to be the easiest person in the world to just spend the rest of my life with. And because we were so close.
Have I been, though?
No, I was so deceived at that moment as well as enlightened. I'm just kidding.
It was so
great.
What's so cool about like your story? So you guys best friends
Yes.
for how long was that?
Definitely a good year and
So
a half.
a year and a half.
probably.
Okay. A year and a half, yeah.
And
more than that.
Then what's so cool is that now you have your kids, Caleb
Yes.
and Karen. So Caleb and Karen, they're married, and Caleb, your son, had this best friend Karen for all these years.
Right,
Yes.
right.
And
right.
we're all thinking the same thing.
Right.
When are you guys just going to get together?
Right.
And now best friends
Yeah.
get married and all
Yeah.
that this past year.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I just think it's so cool that
Yeah.
even a little bit of your story is even
Yes.
passed on to your kids a little bit, and I
Yeah.
just think it's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also brings up a great point. What would because dating and marriage is a little bit different nowadays
Yeah.
than it was even when I was younger.
hard,
You
yeah.
know? It's different. I think some people don't even see. I think there's a lot of people that don't even see the value of marriage. So what would be some advice that you would give to young people, maybe like mid-20s, low 20s, even coming up in their 30s? Like what would be some things or encouragement that you would give them about marriage or dating? Because I think there really is a value behind marriage. I'm not saying you have to be married.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'm not saying if God is leading you down the path to be, it is. That's totally fine because that's what God's calling you to do. But for the people who especially Christians, there's just a lot of Christians who just don't see the benefit because a lot of them come from broken homes too.
That's
so
right.
they've seen
That's
the bad
right.
side of marriage.
That's
So
right.
what's some encouragement that you guys maybe would give some young people about dating or marriage or anything like that?
Marriage is one of God's greatest gifts. For me, I can personalize it first, and then I can kind of maybe broaden this into spiritually what I think that. But personally, I am a better person because I'm married. Now, that's not to say that that's the plan for every single person, and maybe not every married person would be able to say what I just said. But here's what I know. I know that I took that very seriously. Not only to try to hear God as best as I knew how when I was young. I got married when I was 20.
Yeah.
So I only knew what a 20-year-old would know. But I took it very seriously, and I that was something that I had before the Lord that I wanted to make sure I was really getting it right, because this was not just about my life. This was about Carrie's life. This was about whatever that future would look like, and of course, as that means, with my kids and everything.
Yeah.
But for me, being married to Carrie has made me a better person. And I think that that's part of because see, the goal of marriage is not happiness. That is a part, that's a fruit, that's an outcome. When you do things
point.
right
Yeah.
and there's principles
Yeah,
that are in
that's
there,
true.
then
That's good.
you are happy a lot. But that's not the goal of marriage.
Yeah.
The goal of marriage is really, gosh, I wasn't prepared for this depth, and so I'm trying to say something really profound. But if I were to say what is the goal of marriage, I think the goal of marriage is maybe transformation, and maybe the goal of marriage is fellowship, and maybe the goal of marriage is being closer to God, and the goal of marriage is reflecting within this one particular relationship the same kind of love that God has for us.
Yeah.
He calls his church his bride. There's a love relationship he has with all human beings. He loves every single one of us. And so if marriage at its core is about love, and God is love. And so that's another reason why I think it's so important to have God at the center of your marriage relationship, because there is no one person that can fulfill you.
Yeah.
And you're not a half a person just because
Right.
you don't have somebody else. That's not the way that works. But if God has somebody for you in terms of marriage, then it's just as important that you are becoming the right person for them as they are to you. But at the same time, neither one of you are going to really fulfill each other completely. Your fulfillment comes in your relationship with God. And that other person can help you know God, help you be in fellowship with God, help you see blind spots in your life. I mean, it's a part of maturity. There's a lot that goes along with marriage, but it's not just about the fairy tale endings. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but it's a blessing. Yeah. It's not a bad thing. It's not a burden. It's a blessing.
Yeah.
Yes. I think to tag on to what you said too, you're saying don't expect marriage to bring you absolute happiness or fulfillment or identity. I think so often we've thought, I'm not complete until I'm married, or I'm not complete, and that's not the truth.
Yeah.
I just want to encourage people, whatever age, if you are single, first of all, embrace the blessing of your singleness.
Singleness, yes.
I was older than Dale before we got married, but I enjoyed when I was single. I mean, I traveled, I did some things. I'm like, this is great. I was able to just do some things with just really being solely responsible for me. Mm-hmm. And I really love those moments. But in getting married, I am saying I'm choosing to, in a sense, selflessly love and commit to another individual. It's symbolic of covenant, of God's covenant with us, my covenant with another human being. But even in the discovery process, that's what I think is hard right now, is people are like, what? We had to find out what's our deepest values when it comes to relationships. So my thing is, for single people who are out there who really want companionship, they want to be married one day, they sense that's in their path, because I think so often we assume that's for everyone. It may not be for everyone, and that's okay. But to really kind of say, what do I value? Now, we value friendship. Like, we value really good communication, and we believe in just really sharing things, sharing life together. And so because of that, we naturally had a bend towards wanting to be married one day. But start as individuals. I think it's important to develop good friendships where you get to know individuals beyond just the surface. But that takes a level of vulnerability. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of been a buzzword lately. We've all heard about it. Yeah. But to me, nothing provides the opportunity for you to be vulnerable in more ways than marriage, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you can also choose to not be vulnerable in a marriage, so I can say that too, because we all can say, I've got walls. But I think there's the blessing of being vulnerable, and because then you also truly feel and sense the love of that other individual towards you.
That's right.
And it's the closest thing we can have to God's love.
Yeah.
And I love that. So I think it's learning to... We talk about sharing your heart, exposing your life. Who do I want to open myself up to? I think you also have to guard your heart as well. It talks about that in the scriptures. But also, what's that tension and that fine line of what do I guard and what do I expose in gaining deeper friendships and relationships? Mm-hmm. And I think as you're doing that, and you said it earlier, becoming the person. Don't ever enter a marriage with the change list of what you want to do. It'll never work. Yeah. You really have to go saying, I fully receive this person for who they are, and want them to be on their transformational journey just like I would want that same respect and honor in this time frame. So as for people today, I'm just watching young adults that I know that it seems like it's hard to get beyond that surface level of, hey, how you doing? Or maybe I'm attracted to you, or I find something I admire in you, a quality. How do you go beyond that to where, because it seems like even right now, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about this pandemic season we're going through, but even just technology, while it's allowed us to get to know so many more people, how in some ways it's also distanced us. Yeah. So how can we develop those good, strong, lasting relationships that may evolve into marriage one day? So that's kind of what.
That's so cool. No, I think it's great. I think it's a great piece of advice. Yeah. That's so cool. Mm-hmm. All right, so you guys meet in college. You kind of had a little bit of an aha moment by a friend. So now let's skip ahead a little bit. So you guys get married, okay? After you get married, where do you guys end up? Because you guys have been, how long here at New Hope have you guys been here for?
Over 27 years.
Yeah, it'll be 28 years in September.
And then of those years, how many were you guys lead pastors for so far?
Now we have been the lead pastors for just longer. So I think 14 years-ish that we've been lead pastors, and 13 years before that was youth pastors and other roles,
Now, were you guys at a different church for any length of time before New Hope, or was New Hope your first step right after college and marriage?
So when Carrie, the way that this worked out, when Carrie graduated from college,
Yeah.
we were engaged
Okay.
at that time. I'm doing
Yes.
the math.
Yeah, we
Yes.
were engaged because I graduated
And-
college and then went to
And then
Indiana
she went
on staff
to
at a church.
Indiana. So
Yeah.
she was
Nice.
on staff at a church there during part of our engagement.
Yes.
I was still in college.
Yeah.
And then she moved back, and then you fast forward, we got married and everything. And so then my senior year, we were married my senior year.
Okay.
And so we were there at the college. And then from there, then we came to Cornelius, North
Okay.
Carolina, and we were at a church there, Grace Covenant Church. And so we had, I had a part-time
Yes.
role
Okay.
there. We both were involved in ministry,
Okay.
but I was considered the part-time person that was employed. So we were there for a year, and then we came over here to Concord. So yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then how did you guys go from there to New Hope to over here?
Oh, the transition
Yeah,
from
so-
Cornelius
yeah, so-
to Concord.
So how'd you guys what was the connection for New Hope, I guess is the best way.
The relatively short version, but to give you a little bit of detail, the first year of ministry was challenging. There were a lot of wonderful, wonderful things and some great relationships that we have out of that. But nonetheless, it was challenging. I think it was challenging because, I jokingly said earlier about how mature that I was for a freshman in college. The truth of the matter is I'm still not mature. And, there are things, bottom line, it came down to this. I don't even know if I could have articulated it back then, but I had made kind of an inner vow to the Lord to say, you know what, because when I grew up, we moved around a lot. I didn't want that to be my future.
Yeah.
For me, I associated ministry with moving. And that's not even the story all the way across the board. I just associated that. And so I had really kind of made an inner vow that I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to move around everywhere. And so then our first year, we had what now we look back and we think, probably just normal stresses and challenges and
Yeah.
different things. And there were some things that were maybe a little abnormal, and the church itself was going through some transition, and there were a lot of factors. But I was only very young 20s and trying to figure out, and Carrie and I, we did the best that we knew how to do, and God's so faithful. That's why I love His grace, because
Yeah.
even when we were struggling, God still had His hand on us.
Right.
But we kind of felt like we were wandering around a little bit, and anyway, we just had come to the conclusion, and even Carrie and I, we were having some challenges with our own relationship. And I think because, again, we're trying to figure out life, trying to figure out
Yeah.
marriage, trying to figure out how to communicate well, trying to figure out how to, just all the things. So anyway, when we realized that we weren't going to be there at that first place of assignment, when we weren't going to be there for long term, because we just kind of knew this was not going to be long term, at some point we came to that conclusion. When we came to that conclusion, I was not in a real good, healthy spiritual place, mentally, emotionally. I didn't have words for it, but I said essentially, okay, you know what? I'm done. I don't want this. This is not what I signed up for. If we're going to have to move around and all the stress and all the things, so I just decided I just wasn't going to go into ministry
Now, you've
anymore.
told a story, you haven't told a story, but you've talked about a couple times in the 7 years that I've been here in a couple of sermons. You mentioned a time in your lives and in your marriages specifically where it was rough. Is this the same time that you've talked about before? Okay, so it's
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had our challenges through the years.
Probably our first
on
major challenge,
Yeah.
I would
I
say,
think
in
so.
marriage.
Long-term
just
challenge, yeah.
navigating ministry, life. Let's just talk about financial pressure,
Sure.
all of those things that can happen in
There's
any
a lot of
marriage.
very practical things. We were
but-
both working outside jobs full-time, but yet trying to balance ministry, part-time for me, and no pay. You weren't being paid by the church, but, just balancing all these things, trying to figure out, and two, we're Bible college students, and any college student can do this, where you step out of the bubble of college, Bible college or any other college. You step out of the bubble of college, into a world and you have just idealistic views of what you think that should be like. And so when those idealistic thoughts aren't met, when real life is not like what you dreamed, then you have to face, it's just, I don't know, disappointment. It's hard, it's challenging. It's also like getting down to the depth and the core of who you are because you have insecurities that you've never wanted to really actually deal with. And so it's just part of real life. And so there wasn't really any major thing wrong, but our perspective of it was such that it just looked like everything was wrong.
Right.
And we were trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very challenging. And because of all of that, I felt very conflicted because it's one thing to have all this personal stuff going on and then I'm just going out and doing, fill in the blank with whatever kind of job. But as a minister, as a pastor, I felt like this pressure of I need to have my life together. I need to know the answers to this. I need to have it all figured out. And I didn't. So I felt unqualified. I felt unworthy. I felt that I wasn't going to succeed at this thing that I was trying to do. And so, therefore, I just kind of distanced myself from it and said, okay, if this is how it's going to be, then I don't think that that's what I want. And God is so gracious because we were blessed to be able to work at camp. Here's another camp story. That summer, and God met me there. And not only reminded me of who I am, but gave me greater vision for what I could be.
Yeah.
And there were some other people that were very important in that process that spoke into my life. And, so I just thank God for that. I thank God for His grace. I was only 1 or 2 decisions away from not ever being in this place doing what, there's plenty of times where we could have done something else. But God, in His grace, kept, He just does that. He's so gentle. He's so gracious to us. And so He helped us to navigate through that and other seasons of our life where we've, maybe felt something similar. He's helped to navigate us. But it helps to bring us here to who we are. This is who we are. Like, this is what we bring to the table because we walked through those very real times where we just didn't know who we were. We didn't know what we were doing, where we were going, and we felt like we were failures at it. But there was a bigger picture to all of that that we needed to see.
Yes.
I think people forget how important it is to get away and spend some time with God.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're a pastor or if you're a leader or just an ordinary, just like everybody else, a Christian, somebody who believes. Sometimes we're so connected to everything so much that it was within the moment. Like camp is there's a lot going on at camp, but at the same time, it is a place where you get to pull away.
Yes.
And it just, I think as adults, we're just not good at it. We're not good at pulling away. And when we do pull away, we're pulling away because we want to go on vacation, we want to go here. And so I feel like sometimes we just need to kind of create a rhythm or a pattern in our lives as believers of Jesus just to take a weekend, take that Saturday and just get away and just spend some time with God because it's within those moments of seclusion and those moments of like that you can really begin to hear the voice of God, like how you said. That's so good. Yeah. That's so good. So you guys, so you were just talking about the story about how you got to New Hope. So God was reminding you at camp,
and then after that, then we ended up having some conversations. At the time, my uncle and my aunt were here in Concord, and they were the pastors of this church. And
by the way, I do want to mention this because it just popped in my mind. I loved how God dealt with your identity before He dealt with the what you thought was the problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's kind of interesting. He dealt with you as the person before He actually dealt with the job or the
job
the finances.
It's so easy to associate our identity with our assignment.
Say it again for the people in the back.
Isn't it true though? We so often, whether it's our vocation, our status, that's we consider that our identity when it isn't. Our identity is in Christ. Yes. And our assignments will change for the rest of our life.
That's right.
Even seasons of, once you have children, you have that assignment of parent, but it never looks the same from day one.
Yep.
Because you'll never be the parent of a newborn once you've had that newborn. Or however many children you have. Then you'll be the parent of a toddler, then an elementary age child, then junior and senior high, then you're a parent of adults, and then that looks completely different.
Yeah.
Yes, you'll always be a parent, but that assignment's going to change all throughout
Yeah,
your life.
that's
So
true.
you
That's
can't
good.
place your identity or fully weigh in and allow that to be, indicator of who you are and even the value of who you are.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that, yes, definitely the Lord worked with you on your life personally and us. He also reminded us just that he cares and he has a place for us if we just make ourselves available. So it was really neat how it lined up. So I'll let you finish just kind of how all that worked out for here.
Well,
That's really great.
just to kind of put it in a nutshell, my uncle and aunt were the pastors here. And at the time, our church was called First Foursquare Church. And so they extended an invitation for us to be the youth pastors. So my first assignment was that youth pastor was the number one assignment that I had, responsibility. And I love youth ministry. But then along with that, associate pastor was kind of a general role that went along with that, as well as leading worship. And at the time we had a choir in our church, and so I was leading the choir and that kind of thing too. So I did all that. And then through the years, we eventually had a pastoral transition that took place. I was an interim pastor here for a window of time in between those two pastors, and then Pastor Gary and Terry Klaus came to be our pastors, and really became what to me, has been and still is. I honor him very deeply in my life because he was like a spiritual father to me.
Yeah.
Helped me. Not that I didn't have spiritual fathers. I mean, literally, my father is a spiritual father to me as well. And my previous pastor, I would give honor to every single one of them. But Pastor Gary had a very unique place in my life. And so we were able to work together for 9 years on staff, a lot of growing and developing, I think, that happened in our lives during that time. And then after that transition, we became the lead pastor. So that's kind of in a nutshell, all of that story of 27 years worth. But that's kind of how it started, though.
Yeah. I love it. Anything you want to add to that before I ask another question?
No, it's
Okay,
good.
cool.
He covered it well.
Nice. Okay, so now let's jump 27 years, 2020 hits. And what's cool about this, and I think it's going to be fun, is you guys both have different perspectives. Because you're a lead pastor at a church.
Yeah.
Now we consider you just as much a lead pastor as him, but your title right now, currently, is assistant supervisor, and I'll get the wording right. Assistant supervisor for the Southeast District for our denomination. Right. So I say you have your feet on the ground. You're on the ground. You're just as much on the ground, but you've got more.
Oversight.
You're seeing the good, the bad, the ugly. You're seeing the toll that is taken on pastors just in general.
Yes.
So I would love to hear what are some things that you learned this year about yourself or about maybe church. Like, what are just some things that have really stuck out to you as we reflect on 2020? So what are just some of those things that God has been showing you or teaching about yourself or church in general?
I think, speaking from, I'll say that perspective of our district of pastors that are in the 6 states of our Southeast region, and watching them navigate this, first of all, everyone was on a strong learning curve. Even if you had a great tech and media presence as a church or online presence, I think everyone took the hit relationally because we were forced to then be in our homes for a season, because when we were under the strictest, restrictions, we were home. So what did that mean? And I think I watched our pastors throughout our district really struggle with, talk about assignment and identity. That's why I said it earlier, because what do I do when I'm not in front of a crowd of people? Yeah. Because there is an adrenaline rush with that when you minister and you talk in front of people, because if anyone isn't tired when they're done preaching a message, I'm like, did they really preach a message? Because you give so much of yourself.
Yes.
But there's things that are reciprocated when you talk as well. And so much of that fills us. But, we can get our sense of value from that. And so I think I've watched some pastors struggle through that identity crisis, what to do when the crowds, but honestly, that sounds very self-serving, and I don't mean that, but I think also the practical hands and feet of Jesus. That's been where it's been difficult too, is when you can literally, put your hand on someone and say, I want to pray for you, or can I give you a hug? Or when people lost loved ones throughout this, and they weren't able to really grieve properly. And honestly, I think everyone, not just pastors, everyone is grieving because everyone lost something.
Yeah.
But I think we can also see what we gained through this whole, and we're still in the midst of this pandemic and coming out of it, but I think we can also celebrate what we've learned, because I watched families spend more time together than they've ever spent.
Yeah.
I've seen the health of children who have parents that are present, literally, physically present, but just they're looking them in the face and seeing them, and there's been a strength that's been there through this. So you can say, wow, that really cost us something, but we really gained something through that too. So I've seen that small group setting really grow and strengthen relationships and empower people. I've seen others who normally wouldn't lead step out because everyone just waits for that one leader to do it, and now they have to make it happen. So in some ways, that's kind of what I've observed through this pandemic, many other things, but just off the top of my head, that's something that really stands out for me and for our pastors. That I've identified and seen happen. It's still happening. We're still trying to figure out how to do this. And if you even had like an elderly congregation or people that were at risk because of their health, boy, that really limited you for outreach and connection, and for them as well. So to me, that's something that I've just been noticing. But everyone is learning how to do what we're doing right now. We are now either doing a podcast or learning how to. Facebook Live was our best friend at the beginning, so I watched everyone on Facebook Live we can do that really, we can drop back and do that if nothing else, and so you have someone in the back with a little shaky phone doing Facebook Live. But so we've had a gamut of all that, but I think people have learned, hopefully through this too, that we can be present digitally as well as in person. And it can expand our reach instead of limiting us. So I think we've grown through this as well to see how we can not only effectively share the gospel and hope to a world that's hurting, but I think it also allows us to expand our leadership and see many ways that other people can say, oh, there's something I can listen to or run with, or that I can do, or ways that I can share and expand my influence as an individual. And so that's something that I think has been really good through this time frame. So
For a person who plans and likes to plan ahead, there were some things about this that were really, really challenging, because there was nothing, you just couldn't, you'd put one plan in place and then it would change, and it just you were playing a game, but the rules kept changing in the middle of the game. So it's like you just never, how do you define success? How do you know if you're hitting the target? Well, the target keeps moving. So there's a lot of frustration on a leadership level. However, particularly at the beginning, there was also this surge of creativity and adrenaline. And I think that I felt that as a leader. I mean, I remember when we were having conversations of, okay, it looks like, all right, you know what, we need to not meet this Sunday. Like that was, like what a strange conversation. And I remember that was so hard. Like, what? We're not going to meet on Sunday? And we made that decision before our governor even had mandated it. It ended up being that just a couple days after we made our decision that the governor did say that. So we were a little ahead of the curve on that. But we immediately started thinking, well, what can we do? How can we do it? And I'm so blessed to have the team that I have in Kenny. I want to give you props with this, because you really have led our media and tech ministry, particularly this last year. So the learning curve has been basically, it was right inside of you. But we just figured it out, and we just made it happen. And that first week, I sat down in front of a camera, and I just talked to the camera and pretended that there were people there, because I knew I would be talking to those people. And I've had to learn how to do that through the years, to look at a camera, but not see it as a camera, but to see it as people. Because you have to talk to people. You have to minister to people. That's what this is about. So we just did it. We pivoted. We made it happen. And then we had lots of things that we did right, and there's a lot of things we tried, it just didn't work. And one of the challenging things, though, for this past year has been the polarization that's happened. There, politically, there was a lot going on. With the pandemic, there was a lot that was going on. Socially, there was a lot that was going on. Racially, there was a lot that was going on. But we were all, I mean, our whole, I guess in some ways I'm talking about our culture in the United States, but really worldwide. It wasn't like we were just dealing with a pandemic. We were dealing with all kinds of things. But some of these things had roots in life and history, human history. Like we were dealing with things, we were trying to uproot and tackle things that it's not like it just popped up and we were dealing with it. I mean, we're talking about deep-rooted issues. And so it's very, very difficult to balance that out. And, you know, one of the things that I've learned this past year, I have made all kinds of people mad or frustrated, at least on some level. Because, and it's not, frankly, it's not all because of just what I've decided. It's because of where people are. I don't own all of that. Some of that is on other people. But some of it is, you know, that's what leadership is. You have to lead and do the very best that you can, and you move forward, and you try to be humble and gracious and think about everybody and all the situations. But at the end of the day, you know, God's asked me to lead. And so I have to steward that well and humbly. And certainly I make mistakes along the way. I'm just as human as anybody else. But yet God's put me in a position to where I have to navigate through this. And so it's been hard. I think it's been very hard on leaders. My heart really goes out to leaders. But my heart really goes out to people, because for every single person, everybody, you said this, everybody has a story.
Yes.
Everybody has something that they've had to grieve, to process, to navigate, something that's been forced, this change on them, or whatever, financially, physically, all across the board. So it's really been very, very demanding, but it's also been very fruitful and very, I don't know, I just think the hand of God has been in the middle of some of these things too. So
Kind of to tag on with that, I feel like in some ways our time period has been like we've been in a vice that's just been slowly tightened. And individually, as a nation, our communities, I think stuff has risen to the surface that's been ignored and been able to be settled or been able to be disregarded. And one thing I'm grateful for that this time has allowed us to do is allowed us to see people that might have been unseen. It's hopefully allowing us to address situations as a nation, especially when we talk about racism. It's allowing us to finally say, look, we think we're okay, we're not okay. And it's allowed us to hear other people's stories. It's allowed us to grow in our empathy towards others.
that's right.
And honestly, unfortunately, one of the best teachers for empathy is personal suffering. And so I hate that that's happened, but you know what? It's a great tool and a great lesson is that when I am suffering, I know it helps me to then empathize with others who are suffering. And so I feel like this has hopefully raised our empathy level as individuals, especially as believers in the church, but just in humanity. Can we just do that? And so even when in the midst of everything, like the chaos, we can all talk about there's been chaos in the midst of our time of pandemic and COVID-19. But even for me, it's really helped me to go, I can't even judge how someone will respond to a situation, whether it's in anger or violence or in tears or grief, whatever it may be. I cannot be the judge of how they respond to something that is deeply painful for an individual. And so I've learned to say, you know what, that's not my place to even judge their response. I need to understand and know their story. Or I can't say that without ever hearing their side of the story. It's so easy to just make quick judgment calls. And if anything, this time frame has allowed me to slow down and go, I don't know that I fully understand. So what can I do to listen and lean in. And I think I've leaned in and listened to people who are very different than me intentionally. And I've grown tremendously by them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
through their eyes and through their stories. And I'm like, I can't stop learning. I want to continue to do this. And so for me as an individual, it's really blessed me. And I think even just, hey, as a nation, I think we're on a whole, I'm believing we're healing and moving forward. So I just say, keep making strides, even if you feel like you take 2 forward and 3 back. You know, we just need to keep making forward progress in healing individually, in our community, and as a nation. So.
And I want to wrap up our time with this last question. So 2020 is over, and so we turned over a new calendar. But in some ways, it doesn't feel like we did at all. 'Cause,
Same song, second verse.
it does.
A little bit louder and a little bit
And
more.
so it's kind of like we kind of, the vaccinations going around. I think I saw that 20% of the American population has their first shot, their first dose. I think it's like 12% are actually have both shots. So we're getting there, number wise with vaccinations and stuff. And so I think we're all kind of like hoping, okay, if everybody's vaccinated, then we're good, right? But that's the thing. We're all like, right? Like,
Is it?
we're good, So for some, I think for a lot of people, it kind of feels like 2020 is Groundhog Day. And we're on repeat right now. Still the same issues, still the same problems in a lot of ways. So what would be just a quick encouragement that you would give to somebody on how can you look at 2021 a little bit different than 2020?
Yeah.
But like what's an encouragement that you can give to people for this coming year?
I would say this, you can't always change your circumstances. But you can control and change who you are, and you can develop yourself. In other words, if it's true, and I pray this isn't true, but if it's true that 2021 is just going to be another verse of the same song, and again, I don't really think that that's true, but let's just say that that's the case. Certainly what we know is this. Every year is going to have challenges. Every year is going to have unexpected things. Every year is going to have, this is just life. It ought not to surprise us that we suffer. One of the things that I think is very detrimental is as a church, not specifically our church, but just as believers in general, particularly in our nation, we have lost a theology of suffering. We, in fact, have preached a theology that somehow almost promised that you're bigger than that, you're better than that, you don't ever have to go through anything difficult. Now, I believe in having faith in God. God is my shield. He is my protector. There are promises that I hold on to. I'm absolutely holding on to all of those things. However, the people of God, in fact, humanity in general, have always suffered. On some level, none of us is immune from it. So there's not a vaccine for suffering.
There's not.
And even, to your question, even when it comes to the vaccine, isn't it interesting how polarizing that can be sometimes? Because not everybody feels comfortable with the thought of getting the vaccine. And for some, it's because historically there's been a lot of abuse and a lot of things that they have suffered, as particular people that there's a distrust. For others, it's, just there's a whole group of anti-vaxxers and things like that. And that's okay. I'm not trying to throw judgment in any way, but I also think that there's a lot of bad information that's out there that's scaring people. So my personal belief, not that it needs to be anybody else's belief, my personal belief is I'm going to get vaccinated, and I already have an appointment to do so because of certain things. But see, I also don't have to hold everybody to that same thing. Everybody has to hear for themselves what they need to do. When it's all said and done, though, my response would be this, and this brings me back to what I originally was saying, that I may not be able to control the situation and the climate of the things around me, but I can control me. So if we ended up having to be in a repeat scenario where all the things of the world are the same and we're just like doing another lap around this thing, well, it's going to be different. Why? Because I'm different.
Yeah, so true.
I'm different. I'm not the same person that started 2020.
Yep.
I'm different. But that's because I made intentional decisions to grow, to learn, to lean in, to listen to others, to allow the Holy Spirit to work in my life, to use those hard times in my life to really shape and mold and do something in me. I didn't waste the suffering.
Yeah.
You can't
that's
waste the suffering. You have
Right.
to allow God to do. It's not even that God caused the suffering, but God can use that suffering to do something, to make you stronger, to fortify something, to show you something about Himself that you've never seen before. So I'm a different person.
That's cool.
So even if we go another lap, it's going to be different for
Yeah,
me.
that's good. That's a great reminder. We're all different.
Yeah.
We're all
Yes.
different. Whether you like it or not,
Yeah.
you are different than what you
Yes.
were
Yeah.
last year after going
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'll just reiterate some of kind of what you had said, and going from being someone who reacts to someone who responds in every situation, and be intentional. Because it's hard to be a victim when you're intentional about things. So my thought is, even just looking at how we can move through and press through this season so it doesn't look like 2020. We were caught by surprise with several things. So now my thing is always, Lord, what can I do? Because obviously I can't control other people. If you haven't learned that yet, you cannot control other people as much as you try to. As much as you even ride their bumper on the freeway, they're not going to go any faster. And we all learned that. So, I mean, you cannot control other people. But Lord, what can I do? How can I personally be responsible
Yeah.
for my growth,
Myself.
for my intentionality,
Yes.
for my influence in the arena you've placed me in? So what can I do that not only brings personal fulfillment, because I think we all, like you said, let's embrace the suffering, because there is an element of suffering, but how can I be an advocate of hope through all of this?
Yes.
So how can I be intentional to be an advocate of hope? So, and there's times, I think we've all dealt with loneliness, haven't we? We've all, so how can I be, as much as I want to sit back and say, would so-and-so call me? No, be the one that makes the call. Be the one that makes the call, that reaches out, that makes that effort. I'm frustrated with the way our community is divided. Well, how can I be one that unites?
Yep.
How can I be intentional? So I think honestly, and I think even before this pandemic, it's a lesson we can learn, is that if I'm engaged and I'm involved and I'm intentional in bringing hope to others, that my life is going to be fulfilled, there's going to be peace. And even in the midst of suffering, it just gets your eyes off the situation. It gives you the big picture, and you realize, you know what, Jesus is going to get us through this.
Yes.
But I think He wants me to grab the hand of someone else to help get them through it too. So how can I do that and extend my reach? So that's my goal, is 2021 is going to look different, because I think I'm more equipped.
Yes.
And because of my suffering, I'm more empathetic towards those who are suffering.
good.
And so how can I lead the way? Can I be the tip of the spear?
Yeah.
Can I be the tip of the spear for this? Or can I have the machete and I'm hacking away and clearing the brush for someone else?
Yeah.
And I think if we all did our part, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
we'd create a wave of just
Yeah.
hope that
Yeah.
would permeate. So
Yeah.
that's
so
my
good.
hope.
You know, as we're finishing this, I just sense to do something, and you know, we're making up the rules as we
Yeah,
go along.
totally.
This is our
Yes.
podcast; we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
I'd like to pray for people, because there's a lot of people that they're just. It's been tough.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. It's just been tough. It doesn't mean that there's not good things in life.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what makes it even tougher is, like, you look around at your life and sometimes you go, why do I feel bad right now, when actually, if I'm looking at my life, it's actually not that bad, but still there's something. I think we have to pay attention sometimes to the deeper things of what's going on inside of us. And so I just want to pray, and then I'll just kind of
Close
kick
us-
that
yeah,
back
totally.
over to you. Can
Close
we
us
do
out
that?
like service. I feel like
yeah.
close us out.
All
my
right.
goodness.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Father, we just thank you so much for the privilege. Lord, what a great privilege to have authentic conversations. Lord, that's truly our heart. It's what we want to do. But Lord, there are people who are watching and listening to this right now who are find themselves relating on so many levels to the stress, to the pain, to the suffering, even to the joys, but certainly to those moments where we come and we're like, we just don't know what to do next. We don't know what the answers are. We want to be a part of the solution, but we
Yeah.
keep coming up with more questions. Lord, so many things, and we tend to put so much pressure on ourselves to have to figure it all out and to have to know all the answers. Moms who are trying to figure out answers for their kids, and people who are trying to figure out answers for, whether it's business or family or whatever. Lord, would you just right now just reassure every person who's listening right now? Would you just reassure them that you are God,
Yes.
that you are God, and that we can trust you?
Yes.
So, Lord, we may not know all of the answers. We might not even know what the next step is. But you are God, and we put our trust in you. And you have never failed.
Yeah.
And you have led people through all kinds of things. And you're going to lead us through this as well. Thank you for the promise of eternity that goes way beyond what we're experiencing here on the earth. Lord, I thank you that we can put our trust and our hope and our faith in you. And Lord, I pray that this conversation would just breathe life and hope into other people.
Yes.
And I just speak blessing over them in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Great. Well, Pastor Carrie, thank you for joining us today. I know
it's
you'll
great being
probably
here.
be a regular on our
It'll be
podcast,
fun.
but yeah, so good. It was great fun. It was just great to hear
Very
some
good.
new things that I didn't know about you, and I'm sure hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well, getting to know them a little bit more. I just want to remind you, make sure you hit the subscribe button depending on what you're watching on so that you get notifications when all of our podcasts are coming out. If you're interested in learning more about New Hope Worship Center, our church, you can head to our website at newhopewc.org. You'll be able to see some messages from Pastor Dale, myself, even Pastor Carrie, be able to see just kind of what we're all about. And so thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you back next time. All right?
All right.